Hello, fly tyers, and welcome to Fly Tying Monday. I'll sit here and jabber for a couple of minutes before I start talking about the fly, give people time to come in, get a drink, have a bio break, whatever. I'm sure we're going to have thousands of people here today, so got to make sure that we don't have people asking questions about stuff that we just talked about. So I see Roger is here and Chris from Northern Michigan. And who else? Come on, we got to have some international people. We always have some international people. Roger Bird and Irma. Oh, Irma's off. Oh, Irma's here today. Yay. Warren from New Zealand. Tyson's here. Ed is here from Central Florida. Rodney from Missouri. So it looks like we got some people coming in. Kira from Texas. Casey from Georgia. Mike from Stockport, UK. Malcolm from the UK. Rick from Western Washington. Wow, they're coming in. I'm going to stop reading them. Okay. So if you've never been here on one of our Monday tying sessions, welcome. We like to have fun here, so it's perfectly all right to tease me if you want and ask all the questions you want. Julia is here. Julia's lurking in the background. And if you have questions while I'm tying, because I won't be able to look at the comments, Julia will read them off to me. So this is live. So this is your opportunity for two things. One is to ask questions as we're doing it, and the other one is to watch me make mistakes, because I often do. So today, we are tying a double Trico spinner. And before we talk about the fly, let's talk about the hatch a little bit. The Trico is fishermen's, fly fishers' shorthand for Trichorathodes, which is the Latin name of this little tiny mayfly. There's a number of species, but they're all fairly similar. They hatch. Sometimes they start as early as late June, early July, but in most parts of the country, they start early August and might last through October. So it's a long-lasting hatch. And the flies hatch in great numbers, and the spinners fall to the water in even greater numbers, and it's a concentrated event which they all fall at once, which drives the trout absolutely nuts. And it'll bring up lots of trout. The trout get really preoccupied because there's so many flies on the water. You can sometimes get a little closer to the trout, and you can sometimes they'll tolerate a bad cast or a mistake, which is important because these things are hatching later in the season when the water's low. It's usually slower. It's very clear. And so you do have to be relatively stealthy, but the Tricos will give you the opportunity to cast over lots and lots of rising fish. And the fish usually get into a fairly fast feeding cadence because the flies are little and they got to eat a lot of them. And they do. So what happens with this fly is the nymphs live in usually slower, siltier waters. Tailwaters are big for Tricos. Waters like the South Platte, in Colorado, the North Platte, in Wyoming, the Missouri, in Montana. The Battenkill actually here in Vermont has a pretty darn good hatch of Tricos. They're hatching very heavily right now. And, most rivers that have some slow stretches will have Tricos. In some rivers, the fish don't pay a lot of attention to them. In other rivers, it's the main event. So it really depends on where you are. But most rivers do have some. And what happens is the Trico nymphs live in slower, siltier waters, and the nymphs hatch into duns, into the first winged form. It's in some places in the evening, in most places very early in the morning, and this can bring up trout in a reasonable manner. There's a lot of bugs on the water, but they're small, and the fish will respond to the duns. I've found that where they hatch in the evening, it's usually better fishing than where they hatch early in the morning. But they'll hatch sometime within say 12 hours of the spinners falling. And what these things do is, instead of going to streamside brush like most mayflies and molting, shedding their skin and turning into a spinner, which is the form that comes back to lay eggs, they molt right in the air. They molt almost immediately, and the spinners then form these huge clouds usually over riffles. Sometimes it's actually hard to see because the clouds are so thick of these things, and you'll see this wave of undulating little tiny flies going up and down, and they're often kind of tough to see. You have to almost look into the sun to see these spinner clouds, but when you get the right angle with the sunlight, you will see these huge clouds. And when the air temperature hits about 68 degrees, these things fall to the water all at once. Boom. Not all at once, but within a half an hour, they all fall to the water. And that brings the trout up big time. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is they're tiny. In the Western United States, they run a little bigger. I've seen them as big as a size 18, but most of them are around a size 20. Or even a 22. And in the Eastern United States, whether it's a different species or whether it's due to habitat differences, they're usually quite a bit smaller, and they're going to be a 22 or a 24, even a 26. They're tiny. But again, even though they're tiny, they provide a great opportunity, and they bring the fish up. Now, nobody likes to tie size 24 flies, or most of us don't. Nobody likes to fish size 24 flies. It's hard to hook fish on the smaller flies. It's hard to tie them on. It's hard to hold fish on these tinier hooks. So what sometimes works is to tie 2 Trico spinners on 1 hook. And this works really well sometimes because the spinners are so dense on the water that sometimes there's so many bugs on the water that your fly gets lost, and there's just too many naturals. The fish will sometimes seek out a clump of these spinners together. And sometimes something like a Griffith's gnat will work for a clump of spinners, but this imitation, the double Trico, is a little bit more precise. And so not only is this fly going to be a little bit easier to see, and a little bit much easier to hook fish and easier to tie on. It's going to be easier to tie. And sometimes fish will go out of their way to take these, a couple of these spinners that are clumped together. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. It works best usually when there's lots and lots and lots of flies on the water. But this is definitely worth a try. I always tie on a double Trico before I go to the extreme of tying on a size 24 Trico spinner. And you can usually, with this size 18, you can usually get away with 6X instead of going to 7X. When you have to tie on that single size 24, you really almost have to go to 7X. So it can be great. Yes, they're small, but if you miss out on this because you're intimidated by fishing small flies, you're missing some of the best fly fishing of the season. And hopefully this double Trico that we're going to tie today will make you a little bit less afraid of going out and seeking out these hatches. So any questions before we start tying? No questions? Julia, I don't see any. Do you? I see a lot of hellos. I see the, yeah, okay. Doesn't look like we have a question, so I'm going to start tying. All right, I'm tying this on a size 18 BigEye hook, which I think works pretty well for the eastern hatches. And so what I'm doing is tying two, size 22, 24 sized flies on a single hook. If you fish the Western United States, particularly, remember the North Platte, the Tricos are bigger, and you can often do this on a size 16 and get an even bigger fly. But I'm going to tie the 18 today. So I'm gonna go grab a size 18 BigEye hook, and the BigEye hooks are great hooks because they have an oversized eye, and it's a lot easier to thread a fine tippet on these hooks. So let me go grab, because I forgot to get my hook ready. Shame on me. I'm going to take points off my score today because I didn't have a hook ready. All right, got it. We'll take that finished fly out of the vise. And I think I'll tie this at a little bit of an angle from the top so that you can see it a little bit better. Oops, I lost my hook. Mistake number one. You can count them. All right. So I'm going to turn this a little bit just so you can see the top of that hook. And I really, really advise that you use 12-0 thread on this fly. It's gonna make your life much easier. So I'm going to start my yeah.
We have a question. Since it is so small, Brian asked. They said they have poor eyesight, so they already have a fairly strong prescription for glasses and contacts. But I'm curious what type of magnification you use for these types of smaller flies.
Personally, I am very nearsighted, so I just take glasses off when I'm tying small flies on. And I have a little bit of astigmatism, so what I do is I have a pair of glasses that correct only for astigmatism, and because I'm almost a -3 with my nearsightedness, after I correct for the astigmatism, which reduces the blur, and the rest of the glasses are plano, I have a 3x magnification, which I think is about right. So 3x readers or cheaters are probably about the best thing, both for tying and for on the river for tying your flies on. 3x is good.
Okay.
Three diopters, 3x.
And then it looks like Mark had a clarifying question about he said 2487 hook. I'm not sure what that means, but question mark. I don't know.
I don't. It might be somebody else's brand as an Orvis BigEye.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Hook.
Got it.
Yeah. I don't know what the item number is.
Right.
But you can see on this hook, you can see a normal size 18 dry fly, which helps you thread it.
Okay. Tom, you were just cutting out a little bit there for me, but you're back now.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think it's my microphone. Shouldn't be the microphone. Is it okay now?
You're okay now. I'll pop back in if it's cutting out again.
Okay.
All right. Tie on.
Okay. In this case, you're not going to cut off the tag end of your thread. You're just going to keep winding back over the hook until you get to the end. And you're going to try to keep that thread on top of the hook like so. So I've just got that piece of thread sticking out there. And then I'm going to take, I like hackle fibers for this. And you can use almost any color. What you want to do is go through your hackle collection and look for a feather on the side of the cape. They're called spade hackles that have really glossy, stiff fibers. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be too long because this is a tiny fly. And I only put 2 tails on these. And so you can tie a lot of flies with just one of these hackle feathers. You can also use what are called fibbetts, which are I think they're just nylon, fine nylon brush bristles. They sell them in fly shops called fibbetts, but you could probably just use a couple of fibers from a fine clear nylon brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in and grab 2 fibers and pluck them from the stem. Oops. Like so. And then I'm going to lay them on top of the hook shank. And I want to advance my thread up toward the front somewhere. And I like to make these, the tails on the Tricos are pretty long. I like to make them about 2 shank lengths long. So I'm going to hold this off at an angle and just tie back on these tails and pull them a little bit toward you and up so that they stay on the top of the shank and go all the way back to that thread. Like so. Just turn this a little bit so you can see it. And then it helps to raise these 2 things up. It'll separate them. So just kind of push them up like so. And bring the thread between the 2 tails. And get them where you want them. You can manipulate them by pulling on the thread a little bit, pulling on the tails. So you get a nice split tail. And then you just lock that thread in place with a couple turns. And you're done. And you got nice split tails that look like the natural. And now you can cut off your tag end. And then you want to wind forward. And the body of this is just tying thread. A little bit of a taper, not much. And I don't go quite, I'm going to cut off those fuzzies there. I don't go quite to the middle of the shank. And it depends on how big naturals are. But I don't go quite to the middle of the shank. I go to about maybe a third or so, or more than a third of the shank. And then we make our wing. And you can make this wing any way you want, but it should be sparse and it should be kind of sparkly. The wings are pretty clear on the Trico spinner. So this is the way I do it. You can experiment with this. And I'm going to take, this is EP trigger point fiber, which is a very fine fiber that floats pretty well and it's very translucent. I think you can see that there. And I'm going to get about maybe a dozen strands of it. Light gray works. Light gray, light tan, any pale color of this will work. So I've got about a dozen fibers there. I'm going to cut those off. I'm going to wet them to keep them together. And you're gonna want to keep wetting this wing throughout because it keeps the wing together when you're tying. And then I'm going to take one strand of Midge Krystal Flash in pearl, single strand. Don't overdo this. You could put 2 in, I guess, but I only use 1. And you lay that piece alongside your EP fiber or whatever fiber you choose. And then I like to use another flashy material. This one is DNA holo chromosome flash that I happen to find in my flashy materials. But you could use this. Could also use this Firefly Flash. You could use a piece of really thin Flashaboo. This does a couple of things, these 2 pieces of flash. One is, and I'm going to just lay that alongside the rest of the stuff. And then I'm going to grab them all together if I can. I lost my Krystal Flash strand. I grab them all together and again, twist them a little bit and wet them. Now, what this flashy stuff does is not only does it imitate the sparkle of the spinner wing, but it also, as this thing rotates, and I don't think you can quite see it there, but as this thing sits on the water, those flashy things will catch the light and will help you see this fly on the water. Because I've tried little parachutes for this fly so that you can see the fly better. And I don't think it works as well. The spinner has to be pretty flat on the water sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And just cut off the end to even it off. And then I'm going to take about I don't know, an inch long, much longer than I'm going to need. But I'm going to cut an inch long piece of this arrangement here and then hold the rest aside because you can use that for the second wing and wet it again. Just keep wetting this stuff. Keep them wet. Keep them wet here. And switch cameras. I'm going to hold it at an angle like so, centered on the hook. And that's what happens when you don't keep it wet. It goes all over the place. I'm going to take a couple turns in one direction, and then I'm going to pull this around and take a couple turns in the other direction so that you've got that flat, spent wing on the fly, like so. And then to help keep these together, and this is why you want to keep these long, because it's easier to manipulate it. You can take a couple turns, 2 or 3 turns of thread around the base of each wing with kind of gentle pressure. So I did a couple on the far wing, and now I'm going to sneak the bobbin around and do a couple turns on the wing. And just those wings together. So again, very sparse, you know, just a impression of those wings on the water you need.
Tom, Ed's asking a question if they can use EP Sculptify for the wing.
Yeah, I think you could, because that's got a little sparkle in it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you could use EP Sculptify. Yep.
Excellent.
I might, you know, chances are the amount that you're going to use here is so sparse, you might not grab one of those sparkly fibers with that Sculptify. So you may want to throw in a strand of Krystal Flash or something. And next, another thing I forgot, I have to go get it, is my Spectrablend dry fly dubbing, because I love this stuff for small dries. I realized I just knocked my wing out of place. And in black, so I'm going to grab some black, just a little. I'm not going to use much. I don't need much at all. So I've got a little, much more than I need for this single fly. And I'm going to dub this on here just very sparsely. Oops. Very sparsely, just about a finger width of dubbing. Because these flies, yeah,
go ahead. It's looking a little pixelated. Your film is. That could just be on my end, but
it's got to be on your end.
Okay,
because
great.
I'm looking at it here and it's looking sharp. So it may be your It may be your connection.
Very possible.
Unless somebody else's problem. It's not. It's not me, Julia. It's you.
Story of my life.
Okay, so now I'm going to just wind this very sparse amount of dubbing in a figure eight, however you like to do figure eights. Couple turns this way and a couple turns this way. And now you've got that. Oh, I got too much dubbing on there, but we'll make this a little bulkier thorax. So then you've got that little tiny Trico spinner on half of the hook. Now, to make things easier for the front half of this fly, you're going to want to take, you're going to want to take a piece of wire or a little piece of painter's tape or something to hold the wings back. And I had a piece of wire and I can't find it, so I got to grab another piece. And you're going to take the wire and tie an overhand knot in it. Slip it over your fly in the wings and tighten it. It's not going to work. I got to tie the overhand behind the thread. I'm going to forward here for a minute. And I'm going to sneak in here. Careful to grab my wing and tie an overhand knot in. Painter's tape would have been easier here. I'm going to draw that down to like so. So they're just back out of the way. Believe me, this will make your life a lot easier. Get that wire out of the way.
I hate to tell you, but I think it is your connection. Folks in the audience are having a hard time seeing it too, and you're cutting out a little bit. Graham said to stop blaming me for your crappy broadband.
Okay. You know what? I don't. It must be StreamYard, because I'm hardwired to a fiber optic connection here.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Sorry, that's
it's like going in and out, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's not as crisp as usual.
It must be StreamYard. Sorry.
All right. We'll do our best here, people.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, hopefully you can see this. I'm gonna build up just a little bit of a body there, and then right before the hook eye, I'm going to take that second strand of EP fiber and Krystal Flash and one other flashy material and cut a piece of it about the same length as the first one. Doesn't have to be exact because we're going to trim this afterwards. And we're going to do the same thing in the front, tying that second fly. So I'm going to go 2 turns that way and separate it. My wire's getting in the way. And a couple turns this way. Straighten them out. Do a turn around the base.
Looking good now, Tom.
I didn't do anything different. It must be StreamYard's connection. This gets a little fussy, but with some practice, you'll get it. And then go around the near wing. A couple times. Take a turn or two to lock those in place. And then dub, do the same thing, dub just a little bit, same size as the bump in the back. So, oops, I got too much fur on there. You don't need much, too much dubbing. And, you know, you could theoretically build up this thorax with thread, but the dubbing serves to hold some air bubbles and holds your fly floating, and that helps to keep the fly floating. So you're going to wrap around here, wrap around here. By the way, these Trico spinners do get sunk, and if your fly sinks, fish it like a nymph, or just dead drift it. And if you can see the fish, watch them, because they will take these things sunk as well. In fact, some people tie Trico spinners with beads on them, little tiny beads, to sink them. So spinners do get drowned, and perfectly all right. If your fly sinks, the fish may take it anyway. And then I'm just going to tie a whip finish here. And got a nice clean eye so that you can thread it easily, even with a fine tippet. And then take a dubbing needle or your whip finish tool and pull that wire out. Pull the overhand knot out of that wire and straighten your wings. And you've got a double Trico. All you have to do is trim it. So you've got, your wings are much too long at this point. So just pull the wings out. and about a shank length, because these are tiny flies. So trim them there, eyeball it so that they're about even. Trim it there, and you've got yourself a double trico. Very sparse. If you look at commercial trico spinners, for the most part, they're much too bulky. There's a tendency to want to put too much wing on this, but these little tiny hooks are real easy to float, and you just want the impression of those spinner wings on the water. You don't want a big fuzzy bundle on top of there. So those are really sparse, and that's all you need to present the imitation of those spinner wings to the trout. And we can come in a little closer and look at it if you want. There it is, the double trico. And like I said, if you're afraid to fish small flies, don't, because you're gonna miss some really, really good fishing if you pass up this hatch. And let's see, questions. Kira, could you dub the entire body? You could, but you want the bodies on these trico spinners are very thin, and if you tried to dub the whole body, I think your fly would end up looking too thick. So just use your tying thread to imitate the really skinny abdomen on these flies. The thorax is a little bulkier, and the thorax is going to have some little legs sticking out of it as well, because these things do have legs. I just stick with a tying thread and not try to dub the whole body. Does it make any sense to first tie this on a larger hook to get basics down? Yes, Adam, absolutely. You know, I would. This is a size 18, so this isn't a really small hook. But in general, I find that if I'm tying a little tiny fly, I will tie the first couple of them on a bigger hook to get the basics down, and then gradually work down. And you never know, you might want to use those bigger flies for something else. You know, if you cut the tails off this and you cut one pair of wings off it, it makes a really good flying ant pattern. So you know, you can use it for that. Oh, speaking of which, there is another trick during a trico hatch that sometimes works. The double trico works sometimes. The other thing that will work sometimes is throwing a small ant or beetle into the mix, particularly when there's so many flies on the water that your natural just gets lost in the soup of bugs on the water, and you're worried that the fish isn't going to see it or take it because there's so many of them. Casting accuracy is obviously super important with this kind of fishing, but throwing a small ant, like a 16 ant or a beetle out there, when fish are taking tricos, they'll sometimes grab it in a hurry because this time of year they are seeing lots of terrestrials on the water, so that'll sometimes work as well. The other thing is sometimes a little pheasant tail, like a size 18 unweighted pheasant tail or a pheasant tail without a bead, will work during this hatch. So there's lots of little tricks you can do if you don't want to fish small flies. But I would advise you to have some single tricos and some double tricos, because there's some days when that's the only thing that's going to work. But you know, if you get frustrated, try a little fur ant or a little foam beetle over the fish. See if that works. Who developed the double? Mark, I don't know who developed the double. It's been around for years and years, and I'm not sure exactly who developed the double trico. This is my slight variation of what I've seen out there. Mine is a little bit sparklier, and I haven't seen people put a couple kinds of flash in the wing, so that may be something that that I innovated. But this fly's been around. This fly's been around for a long time. Yep, Griffiths Gnat. Griffiths Gnat, Jacob, is a good idea. Chris, 7x leader of 9 foot or so, as it is so small. I'd go with 12-foot leader, but you might be able to get away with a 9-footer. The fish this time of year, when the tricos are out, are in pretty thin water, clear, slow water, and a leader butt lands a lot softer on the water than a fly line, even a 3-weight. And so you want to keep that as far away from the fish as possible. So I would go with 12-foot leader on this, at least. It's a tough tie on a size 18 hook at first, but just practice it a little bit. You'll get it. It's not that difficult. Somebody asked me, how tiny do you tie tricos? For a single trico, Roger, I will go as small as a 24. I don't like to fish them, and I don't like to use them. But there are times when the tricos are really small and the fish aren't taking a double trico, and I really want to catch that fish, so I will try a 24. I usually, if I'm going to do a single trico, I usually start with a 22 and hope the fish take that, or a double trico. And if the tricos are really tiny and the fish just don't seem to want that 22, I mean, there isn't that much difference between a 22 and a 24, but sometimes it seems to make a difference. Would you use this in conjunction with a small unweighted pheasant-tailed nymph? Absolutely not, Brian. I love fishing dry dropper, but in this case, you want your cast to land on the water as softly as possible, and you want to be as accurate as possible. And using 2 flies, even using a bigger dry fly with a trico trailer is not really a good idea. You're targeting individual fish, and you need to be dead accurate. And I don't think fishing 2 flies is wise during a trico hatch. You can try it, but I wouldn't. And even a small pheasant tail is going to sink this fly. This fly is not a high floating fly, so I wouldn't put a nymph on it. How big would you go? I'd go as big as a 16 Mystic Mac. If I were in the Western United States. In the Eastern United States, I think I would stick with this size 18 on the double trico. All right, let's see. Did I get all the questions, Julia?
You got all the questions as far as I saw.
Got all the questions. Well, the trico hatch is just so much fun. And if you're interested in learning more about spinners, fishing spinners in general, I have a podcast that I did a couple weeks ago with Jim McLennan from Alberta, who is the Bow River also has a great trico hatch, and Jim and I talk about fishing spinners, and he spends quite a bit of time talking about tricos. So if you're interested in learning more about this sometimes annoying little bug, if you're in the UK, there's a similar bug called the canis, which hatches on lakes and some streams, and it's called the fisherman's curse in the UK for good reason. Tom, how are you so cool? Dylan, I'm not so cool. Believe me, just ask Julia. She'll tell you I'm not cool. I'm definitely not cool. My wife thinks I'm cool, but that's a good thing. But nobody else thinks I'm cool. My fishing buddies don't think I'm cool at all. Believe me, they don't. Any other questions? You're going in the right direction. Oh, by the way, Julia, who we have to thank for many things, put up the next 3 weeks of Monday tying sessions on the Orvis Facebook page. So if you want to tie along with me and you want to procure the appropriate materials, they're up on the Orvis Facebook page. Now you have to go into the detail you have to click on the fly itself and then click on more down below it, and it'll she's listed the pattern description there so that you can get your materials ready for the next tying session. I know that Ed ties along. I know some of the other people tie along with me, which is always fun. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. I love your questions. These are great questions. Nobody teased me much today. I love being teased, but maybe next week. Well, next time I'm tying with Flagler, I'm sure there'll be a lot of stuff thrown around there. Let's try some crystal meth eggs. I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm going to tie that one. Maybe I do want to tie a steelhead fly in September, so maybe I'll tie an egg fly. All right, everyone. That's it. Thank you for tuning in. I wish you all good tying and good fishing, and I will see you here. I won't be here next Monday because we're filming some new casting videos with Big Pete. I know that all of you would be excited to see those. So I'm kind of producing and helping out shooting those casting videos. So won't be here Monday. Be here the following Monday for a Tim Flagler Rosenbauer tie-off. I'll probably lose, even though it's my own fly, my own pattern. But Flagler showed me a better way to tie my own fly. Anyway, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you 2 weeks from today.